Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Pleasure to speak in this debate and listen to the various arguments on both sides. As somebody who's a committed free marketeer and been in business most of my life, and I don't think I've ever accepted a government subsidy, perhaps other than a Sybil's loan last year, which might qualify under some of this legislation. I'd be interested if the Minister might reflect on that, whether that would. But don't really believe in subsidies, but a world without subsidies requires a perfect free market. We've not got a perfect free market. We don't have the perfect consumer. We don't have the perfect market competition, the perfect provision of SME finance. So at times you absolutely need, a government needs to step in and provide subsidies where there is market failure. So I absolutely welcome this legislation and the vast majority of the provisions of the bill. I'm happy to give way.
I thank the member for giving way. Just in terms of his government providing a subsidy then, does he think that the government under these new terms will provide more subsidies than what they did under EU state aid, or the opposite?
Well, I think that's the wrong question, actually. I know it's his question, but that's the wrong question. For me, the key thing is it going to spend taxpayers' money well? It's not, I don't think we claim a success just by giving more money away that was wasted. More money away that was wasted, if you listen to my point, I think we'd say this has been good if that money, the taxpayers' money that is used, it proves fruitful. So I don't think we should be disappointed that we've had one of the lower levels of subsidies in the countries that have borne comparison today. I think we should be proud of the fact we believe our businesses should stand on their own 2 feet. But nevertheless, I do support, on occasion, the government and other public authorities needing to provide subsidies in certain areas for certain things. So I do welcome the bill. I know my honourable friend on the front bench there will make sure this bill has good scrutiny, it passes through the different stages in Parliament. The key thing I would say, though, and this echoes my right honourable friend, the member for Western-super-Mare, right honourable friend, about a greater level of scrutiny and transparency for reasons I'll outline very briefly. Number one reason of transparency, governments of all shades, as my right honourable friend said, are pretty poor at picking winners, so it's really important that governments and public authorities are held to account for their decisions in terms of granting subsidies, which are, as I said, taxpayers' money, and spend those well. I think the honourable lady who spoke just prior to me mentioned about cronyism. I think that's a very important point. I think some of the allegations, I think unsubstantiated allegations that are brought up in this debate today about cronyism or procurement, which I think really are inaccurate and are shown to be inaccurate if you read the National Audit Office report. And I think people who claim otherwise bring shame on every single member of this House. It is a flawed way of trying to win political point scoring that I think is deeply unhelpful. It is quite clear in the National Audit Office said that ministers weren't involved in those procurement decisions. But nevertheless, I believe in scrutiny. I believe in complete transparency, and particularly when much of this money will be handed out, and significant amounts of money currently without scrutiny. If you look at this legislation, up to £500,000 in some schemes, that can be handed out by a local authority or a devolved region. I think it's really important. Some local authorities have better reputations than others at spending money. It's really important that we can see exactly what local authorities are doing up and down the country, and our devolved administrations too. And my right honourable friend, the member for South Northamptonshire, brought up this point. If we don't see a level of scrutiny, different parts of the country could try and use different means of creating some advantage, or indeed trying to raise grievances, which is not something that we hear too infrequently in this place. So I absolutely support my honourable friend's point about lowering the threshold for scrutiny for transparency from the current level of £500,000 or £315,000 for cumulative subsidies outside a scheme down to a much lower level of £500. As a business person myself, and I declare my interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would have no objection to declaring any taxpayer money we'd received in our business, and I think the only time we've ever received monies were through the furlough scheme and through the Sybil's scheme, which we returned without drawing on it. But nevertheless, I think if we're taking that taxpayers' money, we should be accountable for it. However, whatever level that is at, it's quite clear. I think the only objection you could raise to a much lower limit would be red tape and The research I've seen, it's a minimal amount of red tape and a minimal amount of cost to do that, around £20,000. So I think it does simplify matters in many areas. I think the final point I'd make as well, in all the different cases where things have gone wrong, and I deal with lots of cases of fraud and malpractice in all kinds of different financial markets, the key element of scrutiny, of transparency about identifying wrongdoing is usually come from individuals, members of the public, people who are closer to the ground perhaps than our regulators. If you make this database fully public, you're more likely to pick up on wrongdoing. Members of the public, members of the press who do a fantastic job in tracking down this kind of wrongdoing. So I would really urge the government to look at that threshold, bring it down to a much lower level. Aside from that, I welcome the bill, and I'm really looking forward to my honourable friend's comments as he closes. Thank you.